Hi everybody, it's Steph from Stellium Astrology, and today I thought I would sit down and record an episode about the TV show, the Netflix mini drama series, Baby Reindeer. And I feel compelled to record a show on this just because it's really, really complex and very interesting, very current, and quite disturbing. And it's sort of, I'm not sure the date that it was actually released on Netflix, but it seems to be, I think it's come out in sort of like the past week or two. And over this past month, in April, so in April we had eclipse season, we had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and we also had Mercury retrograde. Now, I am just looking, I looked up the guy who plays the main character. He plays Baby Reindeer. Donald, I think his name is Don. And I've just looked up his chart, and obviously we don't have a time for him, but his Wikipedia page says he was born on the 11th of May 1989 at Wormit, Wormit, in Fife in Scotland. So we have got a chart for him, and I've cast the noon chart just because I think it's interesting to look at a noon chart, just because it gives a kind of professional outlook. Now, the sun is at 20 degrees. His sun is at 20 degrees of Taurus, and it sits right on the cusp of the 9th and 10th house. I mean, I'm using equal. His midheaven, his floating MC, is at 3 Taurus. That's interesting enough by itself, because the recent full moon in Scorpio was at 4 Scorpio, so opposite would be on the IC. Now, a full moon in Scorpio is obviously going to be illuminating the depths in some way, the deepest depths. But, you know, like, I know that Scorpio is a fixed water sign, and it's like usually represented by the iceberg and things like that. But in this case, I've been watching loads of Finding Nemo recently, and yes, we can say that's a very Neptune film, but there is that bit when they have to go really deep because Dory drops the goggles, and then they meet that, I don't even know what the name of the fish is now, but the one that's got the light on it, and it entices people with the light, and then you suddenly realise you're in danger. Those kind of depths with those kind of dangers really feels very Scorpionic to me, and it almost feels like a Scorpio IC to an extent. And I feel like this full moon, for all its empowerment and all the things that can come with a full moon in Scorpio, can also highlight some of the really dark aspects of the psyche. Somebody I was recently speaking to has told me that a colleague of hers had a massive blow up in front of everybody. She was angry because she was underperforming, and she didn't like the fact that my colleague was just hitting their targets constantly, exceeding their targets. And instead of being humble and, you know, kind of supportive and, you know, maybe saying, well, how do you do it? Like, you know, learning from it. She basically went the jealousy route and really, really exploded on the full moon. Lots of stuff happened on the full moon. But my point is, interestingly enough, that this is Richard Gadd, the creator, the storyteller of Baby Reindeer, and actually the character Baby Reindeer was based on him and his story of being stalked. He actually has sun at 20 Taurus, and his midheaven, his floating midday MC at 3 Taurus. I would absolutely love to know his actual birth time. But what's interesting about that is the full moon recently highlighted his IC. Now, what else I find incredibly interesting is that he is... Okay, so the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that just happened, I think it was at 20... Was it at 22 degrees? Something like 22 degrees. I don't even have my other little book with me now, but yeah, 22 degrees of Taurus. So that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction happened on his sun. And according to his noon time, according to his noon chart, he has Leo rising Sorry, sometimes I find it hard to articulate myself. He has Leo rising, 21 degrees of Leo rising. So that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction would have squared that point as well. So just taking it from this, he's got Moon and Leo rising. So Moon at 7 Leo and 21 Leo rising. And his Sun is at 20 Taurus. So what I found interesting was that when the sun went into Taurus, obviously it's squared transiting Pluto, which is now in Aquarius. I'm just going to select the current transits as I speak. In fact, I'm going to take it back to... I wonder if I can find where it says, whether it says it when it was released. Career. I wonder if it will say... You know, the guy is Scottish, born in Fife, and he was in his character, warning, there is going to be some spoilers here, but his character is an aspiring comedian, and it's really interesting because he plays that character in the show, and he is actually an aspiring comedian in real life as well. So very interesting to see that he's making references to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And what I find interesting about the Edinburgh Fringe is that I referenced it in my article about Pluto's perihelion, because Edinburgh Fringe was where Kevin Spacey made the presentation about the changing in viewing habits for people and how people need to binge. And actually, Richard Gadd has his Pluto 1 degree away from Pluto's perihelion degree. So his Pluto is in perihelion. He was born like a generation of people, not only with the Uranus-Neptune conjunction, it's not quite... He's got Uranus at 4 Capricorn, Neptune at 12 and Saturn at 13. And so he's got that very, very special triple conjunction, that stellium in Capricorn, though there's a social planet there, Saturn, not a personal planet. So he hasn't got a personal planet in Capricorn. Doesn't mean it's any less important. He's obviously a person who is channeling the zeitgeist in some way, because he's in the public eye right now, and he is a figurehead for a movement, or for a number of movements actually. So we'll get discussing it. But he does have his personal planet Mars opposite Uranus and Neptune and Saturn in Cancer, and he also has Chiron there too. So there is a personal planet feeding into that, but it's in an opposition. So that might describe the stalker, the attraction with the stalker. The fact he's got his Sun at 20 and he's got his Pluto at 13 in Scorpio and at the perihelion degree describes that he will be very much in contact through other people, through his relationships, with what Pluto could mean in the perihelion. The transformative power of Pluto, the fact that he's using he's being published on Netflix, a program, a story of his life, because his Sun is opposing his natal Pluto at 13 degrees of Scorpio, and the perihelion degrees at 14 Scorpio, and Neptune, Netflix's Chiron, is at 14 Scorpio. So it's interesting how this story of pain, because there's a thread of compassion that goes through the whole thing. It's a strange relationship he has with this woman. It's almost as though he really does care about her. He does. And she's in love with him, but that kind of devouring, destructive love that only a Scorpio could really experience and express, I think. I don't know what her birth data is. And maybe if I find out, I'll do another show. But it's very interesting that Netflix decided to put this show out and tell his story. And they did so when the Sun was squaring Pluto in Aquarius, and then Venus followed. So it was like this Sun square Pluto. So this is when baby Reindeer comes out, around that time. And then as I watched it, Venus was entering Taurus and making a square with Pluto. Now, I have a Venus-Pluto square natally, and anybody with a Venus-Pluto square, I would urge you to get in touch and tell me if you can relate to this, but often we are able to understand what it feels like to have that kind of obsessional love. Often it's somebody else that gets quite interested in us, and it's very much often uninvited, unwelcome, and there's this kind of almost like people get fixated. I mean, I have Venus and Pluto. Well, Venus is in a fixed sign, Pluto's in the last degree of Libra, so there's an interesting connection with that. But anyone with a Venus-Pluto contact I'm sure will understand the power that comes with that, and the unrelenting fascination that others can have in you, and also your unrelenting fascination in things too. It is a two-way street. So yeah, that being released at that time I found very interesting. I thought it was quite an interesting phenomena. Now that itself kind of tells a story about the complicated and difficult to articulate right now. There's a very, very difficult ability when it comes to Venus, Pluto and the square, and that by transit often we find taboo stuff we're not supposed to talk about. The stuff that's supposed to be hidden often comes up, and it could be taboo. Like sometimes it can be about like things like cultural appropriation. Like you see people talking about how certain people aren't catered for in the cosmetic industry because of skin tone and a lack of representation there, or talking about how certain hairstyles, it's offensive for people to wear certain hairstyles because of cultural appropriation, and how that they don't understand the history behind wearing your hair a certain way, or because you're trying to portray yourself as something that you're not. This inauthenticity, and how Venus wants to dress up in that way sometimes. But it's it can also be about the fear. This program was a lot about his terror and his fear of people finding out the truth about him in some way them finding out that he, spoiler alert by the way, was raped. And that whole story, I mean, when I was first watching it I was thinking this is very much a Neptune story of somebody who is being sucked into this unboundaried world, but the obsession is beyond Neptune. I mean, there was definitely elements of mental health issues there, but this Pluto perihelion thing that he's got in his chart, and the sun opposite that, is very much descriptive of that. And he actually has Ceres opposite his Pluto as well, and I feel like Ceres has a very Pluto feel about her too. The whole story of the fact that she's an agricultural maternal type of goddess is one thing, but I guess I don't know enough about Ceres to really wax lyrical about her, so I shan't. But baby reindeer, having that Mars Chiron in Cancer opposite his stellium in Capricorn, that Uranus, Neptune and Saturn, it brings a real personal experience into it. And he, that kind of laser sharp focus of Mars in Cancer, just Mars in general, that kind of unrelenting pursuit, the thrill of the chase almost you get with Mars in relationships. There's this kind of motivation to have. And the thing is about him is that he cared about her. And with this, and they cared about each other. There was something about them that was, he admitted, like, he snuck up, he followed her home, he wanted to see what she was about, he was curious. And he looked through her window and she caught him spying on her. And that in itself is almost reciprocating that unwanted attention. It's almost like saying he wanted it. He referred all the time to himself saying, it made his life more exciting. He was more interested. She made him feel the way, she saw him the way he wanted to be seen. And that's interesting because it's almost like admitting that there was an interest, an enjoyment there. She acknowledged him. She saw him. So, yeah, I found this all very interesting. The Leo moon fits for me, definitely. The idea that he, I did say to Chris when we were watching, I did say to him at one point, I was like, the way he handled it, he handled it in the most, like, dramatic way he possibly could have done. Like, there could have been ways that he processed things and handled them in a more diplomatic, logical way, like going to the police and not telling them about her history of being a serial stalker. I mean, it would have made sense to just say, look, this woman's got a record for doing this. She has done this. It has, it's scary. I'm being stalked and I'm concerned for her health. That would have probably been the first thing that he should have led on. But instead, he allowed the police to turn him away a number of times. And, it just felt like he left out details because it prolonged the suspense for him in some way. And again, like I said, he cared for her, and he'd already had these experiences with, like, the guy that raped him. It feels like he was having a Pluto transit. Now, speaking of which, they announced a date in the programme where the stalking began, which was the 24th of August 2015. Now, whether that is truly the date, I don't know, but let's have a little look at it. So 24th of August 2015. Now, I know there were some interesting transits occurring back then. I'm just going to do midday again just because it's easier. And I'm going to say London because that's where he was when it started. And let's have a quick look and see. So, yes, the sun was at 0 Virgo, Sun-Jupiter conjunction when that happened. And so Uranus is at 20 Aries and Pluto is at 13 Capricorn. Now, he's got Saturn at 13 Capricorn. Now, I do wonder, based on this story, whether he actually has... It crossed my mind, him having something in the cardinal signs as his rising sign, maybe, because, or in a very prominent place, just because it felt to me as though, the dating, the timings for this felt very much in keeping with Pluto and a Pluto transit. So looking at Pluto on his Saturn here, and that being when the stalking commenced, according to the date they gave in the TV show, I feel like it's possible he might have Capricorn rising, potentially. It could be that he had Aquarius. It could be he has Aquarius rising because that's also Saturn ruled. And, he has that Uranus, Neptune and Saturn conjunction in Capricorn. So they're all working together. So it could be that he has Capricorn in the 12th house and Aquarius rising. We don't really know. But I just kept thinking, this sounds like Pluto's really hitting his chart hard in some way. And you might say that he met the experience through other people. So you could say it was on the descendant and possibly he has Cancer rising. But because he was immersed in this experience and it wasn't necessarily about the relationship, he went through an awful lot at that time. He was raped, and then through the rape he was very confused and he questioned his sexuality, and he ended up falling in love with a trans woman and having a very authentic and genuine relationship with her. And her also sort of psychoanalyzing him and saying that this woman, Martha, is literally the epitome. She epitomizes all of your fucked up projections. It just was, it was an interesting observation, and I felt very astute having watched the show. And the whole time he was putting himself through this kind of almost grueling self-ridicule, just trying to be a stand-up comedian. I love people who have the passion and the bollocks to go out and do this kind of thing, particularly stand-up comedians. I don't think there's anything more frightening and more exposing than going out and trying to be funny and trying to make people laugh. I've got so much respect for comedians like Bill Hicks. I absolutely love Bill Hicks. He was so real. I am so gutted about the fact that he passed away, and he, you know, took such a terrible turn in his health after he was turned away. Was it from... Why am I going to... It's not Jay Leno, was it? Who was the show he was going to go on? And then they were like, no, actually. But he was really going to make it big in America, and he really worked hard, and he was really a truth speaker. But, you know, that's what I think about comedians. Real truth speaking occurs, and you have to expose yourself. And the problem is, if you tell the truth the way that you see it, you're not always going to be made famous or be successful, because often the voices that perpetuate the narrative are the ones that are going to go far. Which is why when you turn on the telly and you see the people spouting off all this utter nonsense on TV, you know that they're really good at just parroting what they're expected to say, as opposed to really being real. And the ones that really speak the truth are often the ones that are shoved into the dark corners, where they don't really receive much accolade, unless of course they're really good at promoting themselves on social media, where there isn't as much control over that. And this is what I get with this guy. He's very much just trying to do his thing, and he obviously is funny. He obviously has got that ability, but he lacked such confidence because he was so downtrodden in his life. And then this woman came along and saw him for what he was. So yeah, it's it was a very complex program to watch, and so interesting. And the way it turned at the end, and he was listening to all the recordings that he had of her voice messages, and he was like listening to her. It was almost like a very much symbiotic relationship. It felt like they both got something from it in a weird way, and he was fascinated with her fascination, and it was like he loved to hear about the person he was in her eyes. I don't know if you've ever asked somebody to tell you what they love about you. I have this app. It's really helping me. It's really, really helping me. It's for people who are neurodiverse, which I am embracing my ND, and it's called Finch, and I love it. And it's like a daily thing that I check in, and I go through my to-do list. It's absolutely enormous. It's like about 50 things on it, so I often skip things to the next day. But you earn points, and you can buy clothes for your Finch, and it's really, really silly, but it gamifies life and it helps me, so it works for me. If anybody's interested, get in touch and I'll share more about it. But part of this app, like once a month, it says ask somebody you know to tell you what they love about you. And I always feel really awkward asking people to do it, but I want to complete the task. This is how it works for people like me. I'm like, I must do the whole list. So you ask someone to tell you, and you hear what you sound like in another person's eyes. You literally discover yourself from their perspective. And I guess he wanted to be that person from her perspective, and he was fascinated by her emotions. He was pulled in some way. So yes, interesting that this TV show could be coming out during a Sun-Pluto square, Venus-Pluto square, Neptune in the final degrees of Pisces, where we're dealing with the ultimate delusional, wishy-washy, unbounded, infectious, viral nature of Neptune, waking up to all the lies, realising it's all been a massive dream, that kind of thing. And Uranus as well in Taurus, sort of awakening us to this potential for change, and also for like deeply disturbing stuff that literally shakes you at your core. And this guy's chart really plugs into it. And if only we had his actual ascendant, it's possible it's Aquarius, it's possible it's Capricorn, it's possible it's Cancer, it's highly possible it's Leo. It could be. I mean, it could be anything. We don't really know. But it definitely feels like he's having major transits. Now, actually, his parents got stalked as well. So, yes, the reason why these dates stuck out to me was because of the Uranus-Pluto square. But let's have a quick look at... so the 22nd of the 3rd, 2017 was when the stalking stopped. Oh, so his parents... it started on the 6th of June 2016. So let's have a look at the 6th of June 2016 quickly. 6th of June, and that was in Fife. So, edit chart, 6th of June 2016. I'm doing a little chatty, waffly show because people have requested this because they've missed my waffle, weirdly enough, which I think is really sweet, but also kind of odd. Where did I say he was born? Warmit. Never heard of it before. But then I've never been to Scotland, and I need to go because it's a place I feel drawn to, actually, and I've heard so many wonderful things about it. She starts stalking his parents when the sun's at 16 Gemini. Venus is at 16 Gemini. Now, he's got Gemini in his chart. He's got Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter in Gemini. So it's possible at this time he's feeling, he's being forced to address what's truly important to him, because when his family starts getting impacted by this, it changes. It's a game changer, isn't it? It's like, you can do what you want to me, but the second you start hurting people I love, then you're in trouble. That's definitely how a Mars in Cancer person would feel. If they go for the family, if they go for what feels like family to you, then there's big problems. And this woman seemed to find her way into his home even, So, yeah, it's very, very manipulative. Now, yes, she started stalking his parents around the time... so Pluto was at 16 of Capricorn. Uranus was at 23 Aries. What's going on here? Let's have a look. Look, Mars is at 26 Scorpio. Now, interestingly, when the stalking started... For him, Saturn was at 28 Scorpio. So Mars is just coming retrograde to trigger that Saturn placement in Scorpio. That's interesting. That's interesting to me. And I remember where I was when all this stuff was happening, because it was my Pluto transit to my Sun. So interestingly as well, so his Juno is highlighted during this as well. And Juno is like the... I want to say like undying love, like the long-suffering wife placement almost. And he's got Juno at 28 Leo. Then in the chart where his stalking began, the Sun and Jupiter were at 0 and 2 Virgo, which is close enough to that Juno placement. And then in the parents being stalked chart, he's got Jupiter at 14 and the North Node, the transiting North Node at 17 Virgo, so trine that Pluto in Capricorn, and the North Node is on transiting Juno from when he got stalked. So I'm sorry if this is starting to turn into a bit of a real major waffle fest, but it's just interesting to just look at the way that this layers up. So now I want to see what happened when it all stopped. So it all stopped 22nd of the 3rd, 2017. So the 22nd of the 3rd, 2017. Now I think that went into Capricorn. Saturn went into Capricorn, I think, at that point. Now let's move this around. There we go. So, yes, so it all stopped when the Sun went into Aries. The Sun in Aries at 2 degrees, and Venus was retrograde at that point. So I guess they were going back over things and how their very complicated relationship, kind of... Because this is where she was, it looks as though either she stopped or this is around the time that she was being sentenced. I'm not entirely sure. Oh, wow. And the North Node is at 3 Virgo and the South Node is on top. It's on top of his natal South Node at 1 Virgo. So that's interesting, isn't it? So his nodes are in Virgo and Pisces. His north node in Pisces, his south node in Virgo, and he was having his opposite. So the transiting south node was on his north node, and the transiting north node was on his south node. So he's having the half return. So that is a very interesting one. And in Virgo and Pisces, it's definitely one that struggles to say no, one that struggles to set boundaries, one that there is an element of care and compassion involved in this in some way or another. Wow, it's so complicated. Wow, it's so complex. Yes, and at the time of it all stopping, Mars was in Taurus as well. So it was almost like it was highlighted and the brakes had to be put on. And Mars in Taurus can be even more physical, even more strongly invested in getting what it wants, because it's so fixated. And I think of people like Muhammad Ali. I'm pretty sure he has Mars in Taurus. I think he does. And it's that float like a butterfly, sting like a bee thing, that very muscular physique. But there is something about the idea that during this Aries season, when it all stopped, it was almost as though like it's a real reality check, bringing it back down to earth. This must. And the thing is, it hasn't stopped because she's trying to sue him now. I think she wants money for it. Oh yes, look, there it is. Saturn is at 27 degrees of Sagittarius, and it's going to be going into Capricorn later that year. Yeah, that's also the degree for galactic centre. So to me, that's an interesting place for Saturn. It's almost like there was this kind of cosmic plugging in to the central switchboard of the spirit, if that's what you can call it. So I know, just a waffly one, but I really wanted to do something about baby reindeer because I really, really felt compelled to say something. It was very, very interesting, disturbing, and fascinating. I guess I'll finish on the fact that Jupiter in the chart of the final stalking, the end of it all, and his sun. So it's Quincunx's sun. It's in Libra at 20 degrees, which means that Venus retrograde at that time is very instrumental. He's having his Jupiter trine. Jupiter will have trined his Venus, his Mercury. So I guess it's saying that there was this is the time when he was gathering the information, and when it finally quincunxed his sun, it was like I've said, the quincunx is almost like a light switch. It can, one works or the other works. They don't always work together. So it was kind of like a switch that went off. So there we go. There's my little thoughts on that, and it's not particularly articulate. It's just me waxing lyrical about multiple charts. I'll leave details for the charts in the comments and in the description, and I hope you really enjoyed it. It's nice to just sit down and just breeze about astrology when I get a spare moment. Unfortunately, my little boy is fast asleep in the back, which means I actually have a moment to myself. Take care, guys. Thank you so much for listening. I'll speak to you next time.